Hello. Today we have another interview of our Storm interview series with scholars that come to Emlyon and Storm Research Center. Today we have the honor of hosting Professor Innan Sasaki from Warwick Business School, and we will ask her to share with us her experience, her research interests, and her trajectory of research. So I will waste no more time. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us about your research interests?
So, hello, I'm Innan Sasaki, Professor of Organization Studies from Warwick Business School. Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. So, my research interest has always been around the role of traditions, collective memories, and more broadly, temporality in organizations and in fields. And I've been interested in how forces from the past come together with the forces for the future and present, and how they collaborate or compete in the present moment. And yeah, so that has been always the case since my PhD time and hasn't changed much.
And how come you became interested in those topics?
I grew up in Japan. My dad is Japanese and my mom is from Finland. But then the whole family moved to Finland when I started university. And as I was in this Western society, I really missed Japan, and that's how I decided to do a PhD on Japanese long living heritage crafts companies in Kyoto, and that's a location. So Kyoto is a location that's the ancient capital of Japan, and it's like the place where all the traditions cluster together, and they are maintained purposefully in that region. And I studied companies that survived in this region for over 100 years um, to try to understand how traditions are maintained collectively in organization, but also in that region. Um, and it is really, I think, by missing my home country that I um, got really interested in this topic. Um, yeah, so I think that's how I started my PhD, and yeah, it was a very much fun project, and I learned how valuable skills are maintained until today for multiple generations. How valuable values and ideas are maintained across generations, and it was really interesting to learn how maintenance happens and is perpetuated over time, but at the same time they have to innovate in order to stay relevant to today's society. And studying this kind of tension was very, very interesting for me. And yeah.
Very, very interesting. There was the this touch of the past in your own passion and motivation in terms that you mentioned you missed your homeland. And then there's this element of history in your work, and there's always this touch of temporality. So, how did this idea of temporality contribute to your research work?
Yeah, thank you. So like I said, my research interest has always remained quite stable. So when I moved to UK, which is already 10 years ago, I was first at Lancaster University before at Warwick Business School. Um, I thought I would study the same stuff in the UK, so I went to study the British heritage crafts industry, and that was very interesting to see how the Japanese and the British situations are actually very different. But again, it was very interesting to see how people, the craftspeople, tried to maintain their uh, you know values, but also skills um, over time, and what has to stay. What are the good things that should stay, and what are the kind of more negative or unnecessary things that shouldn't stay over time. Um, so I think what's really interesting is as a if you think of like a humanity as a community, right? How can we what are the valuable skills, things that we want to um, continue and you know um, receive from our predecessors or our ancestors um, to help the humanity flourish even more, and what are the things that we want to discard, and through that process of past versus future, how can we progress as a humanity in a more positive way, right? So that's the interesting thing. in my opinion.
Very interesting insights. Thank you. And for the next question, currently you're working on this Finnish Karelian project and the idea of collective trauma and memories and how this collective trauma is inherited through generations and in some capacity actually provides a sort of motive for growth. So I believe there are some twists in the story that like trauma can provide some motivation for positive growth. Would you please tell us more about that? And how does this project, how does this research shifts our perspective about collective trauma?
Thank you. Yes. So I mentioned I studied a long living Japanese companies for my PhD and then the British heritage crafts sector. And of course, I did many like other things too, but these are my own kind of personal projects. And then, yeah, since 2018, already many years ago, I started to interview the Finnish Karelians. And the motivation came from, again, personal interest. It's always my personal kind of curiosity and interest that drives me to study new contexts. And in this case, I decided to study Finnish Karelians because my own grandfather is one of the evacuees from the Karelian region in Finland. And so my mom grew up partly in this Finnish Karelian traditions. And because I'm kind of like mixed, I have a mixed heritage, so I didn't grow up so strongly in the Finnish Karelian tradition, but it was kind of like interesting curiosity for me to learn about that tradition more. So again, because of very personal reasons, I embarked on this research, and the initial research question was more simple. It was how can the Finnish Karelians maintain their own traditions across already 3 or 4 generations, even after they lost their land and they had to be internally displaced in Finland. Um, so that was the starting kind of research question. But as I went into this Karelian League, there's an organization called Karelian League, and I participated in their cultural activities. I noticed that at the same time as these good memories and positive, beautiful memories are being reproduced, also the subsequent generations are constantly reminded of their, traumatic past and the displacement and the war and things like that. Again, the beautiful memories and the traumatic memories are both kind of reproduced at the same time through these cultural activities. Um, and I was asking myself whether it's a good thing to reproduce trauma, because maybe it's easier for people to just forget, not, relate to the ancestral past and just forget and live a good life, right? But what I found was that for the second and the third generation, even if they didn't directly experience the traumatic events, by learning the trauma, but at the same time combining that with good memories, they could kind of find belongingness, find more like an existential identity that's connected with their positive aspect of their ancestry. And through that, they can, have a more kind of integrated life or achieve some kind of sort of cross generational post traumatic growth, if you may. So it was quite interesting to see that people can be empowered and they can find peace and hopeful future, even if two generations ago their ancestors had to go through something very traumatic, right? So 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 it was very kind of hopeful for me to study this community in terms of how they overcome their past and try to thrive, and they're very extremely resilient, right, and positive minded people. Um so it was personally interesting and I think important discoveries that I made through this project.
Thank you very much for the insights. And what are the next steps in this project? What comes next after this?
Yes, thank you. So I think that I said that my research interest is always quite stable, and I think that's still continues to be so. So I'm usually, again, interested in collective memory, traditions, and how to create a better future um, with the connection from the past, right? But as I studied the Finnish Karelian community and some other contexts as well, and if you look at the world today, right, it's quite difficult place to be in many ways as we listen to the news and we see a lot of, wars, social polarization, and sometimes we wonder like, oh, where are we heading to? And this is very difficult time to live in, right? Um, but I think for me, the Finnish Karelian society gave a lot of hope because, as I said, even if your ancestors went through something very difficult 2 or 3 generations ago, it might take some time, but um, people are resilient. You can overcome trauma and you can grow out of trauma, right? Um, so, which makes me think, what are the processes? And again, connected to collective memory, what are the kind of memory processes or memory work through which we can reach to forgiveness, for example, or how can we reach to, mutual reconciliation or peace, if you want, peace or hope, right? So these are like big ideas, but um, if I think of my own research trajectory as well as the situation in the world today, these are the topics that really interest me, and I would like to study contexts in which organizations try to promote peace in very difficult situations, and try to learn the processes, the memory processes through which um, a better future can be created.
Uh, Thank you very much for the insights, for the very positive and hopeful insights about future and peace and mutual reconciliation. So let's move forward to the question that we asked all our guests here. What are your advices to junior scholars and PhD students to develop their career?
Thank you. Um, I think every kind of trajectory is different. Everybody has their own path. So um, this advice may fit for some people, maybe not for others. But in my case, I think it was good to kind of follow your passion, even if it didn't look very trendy, maybe, because there are always more trendy topics, right? Um, but still, I think it's important to follow your passion and what really truly interests you, because that becomes a fuel or an energy for you to overcome a lot of challenges that we have in academia, such as like rejections from journals or um, many other obstacles that we face, right? So I think, at least for me, an important ingredient has been to have this persistence, right? To have the persistence to do and continue work on areas that you really want to um, continue. And then it doesn't become, it's no longer just a job or even just a career where you want to make money, but it becomes a calling, right? So I think having the sense of calling is what would, I think, sustain you and deepen your theoretical contributions. Every time you do a new project, in my case, in the area of collective memory, your contributions are deeper and deeper and deeper because you've been doing that for like 15 years already, right? So I think having that calling or sense of passion is really important. Yeah, that would be my maybe number one advice. Yeah. And then I have also a very nice quote that helped me overcome a lot of difficulties at different moments in my career that another like a senior scholar gave to me. So if I can read that.
Sure, go ahead.
So he told me that it's a quote. I have nothing else to offer the world when I'm careful. There are smarter, more articulate, more organized, and more artistic people than myself. But I have my sense of beauty. My work must be the expression of that in whatever form needed. Listen to your memory. What comes will be beautiful. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I think it's to kind of believe in your uniqueness and not to compare yourself with other people who are, always more published or always, seemingly doing more important work, because um, what comes out of you is beautiful, and you should value that. Yeah.
Amazing advice. Thank you. Thank you very much for this super insightful conversation. We wish you the best of luck with the continuation of your projects, and thanks again for giving us your time.
Thank you so much.